Kashwa'ala. Hello and welcome. My name is Kathy Narcissus and I will be discussing the salmon fishery of the Upper Statimc people. The Fraser River salmon fishery has been an essential element in the lives of the Statimc people for generations. The bountiful supplies of the spring, sockeye, and coho salmon were the primary resource of our ancestors, and today the salmon continues to occupy an important role within our culture. The Statimc people have always had the knowledge and technology for making the several types of nets used to catch the salmon. Traditionally, the mesh nets were made during the winter months using natural hemp, which was twisted together into long strands. Today, commercially manufactured string or twine is used to prepare the nets. Desmond Peters Sr. shows us how the nets are made. The tools used to manufacture the nets are a gauge and a needle. These tools vary in size depending on the types of nets being made. Here we have an example of a net which is ready to put on the set net hoop. Des explains about the width of the mesh being made to catch the sockeye and coho salmon. The string around the outside of the net attaches to the trip rope. This is a spring salmon gill net. The size of the mesh is larger in order to catch the larger sized spring salmon. Traditionally, the spring salmon was the main salmon caught and used by the Statimc people. Here are some examples of the gauges and needles used in the manufacture of the nets. Marcel Adrian shows us a new set net. This type of net is used in the river where there is a back eddy. The net is held by the fishermen and is also anchored to the shore to help keep it steady. The trip rope is used to close the net opening when a salmon goes into the net. When the salmon run is at its peak, fishermen can catch several salmon in their nets at once. Bucky Ned has caught 4 salmon in his set net. The length of the Fraser River within the Statimc territory provides several excellent fishing spots. All of these places have their own Statimc name. The orange and blue tarps show where the drying racks and fish camps have been set up near the river. These camps shown here are located down by the old suspension bridge below the town of Lillooet. There are 3 types of gill nets. Gill nets in general are usually used in the areas of calmer water along the river. A salmon is caught in this pulley gill net. A pulley gill net is set in a bay. The places on the shore where the salmon are bled and gutted are usually cleaned afterwards with buckets of water. Sam Copeland has caught a salmon in his pulley gill net. His net is strung out across a small bay directly below the old bridge. We see how he pulls the gill net out of the water. The rope holding the net is attached to a pulley which is tied to a rock wall on the other side of the bay. Since fishing is a family activity, the children are always somewhere nearby. They do their share of the work by carrying the salmon from the river up to the drying racks. The round objects that are along the top of the net are the floats which hold the net up in the water. Weights are used along the bottom of the net to hold the net straight down in the water. The floats and weights keep the net from getting tangled once it is in the water. The salmon is untangled carefully so as not to damage the net. After untangling the salmon from the gill net, the neck is broken in order to bleed the salmon. The salmon is bled right away so the flesh remains nice and fresh. The net is reset in the river by pulling on the rope which is connected to the pulley. The rope is then tied to the rock wall on the side of the bay. Here we have some examples of drift nets. The drift net is also a gill net. A drift net is positioned at the point of a rock which extends out into the river. The drift net also has floats and weights along the top and bottom so that it will hang properly in the water. When a fish is caught in this type of net, it is simply pulled out of the water. Leonard Abraham has caught a salmon in his drift net and he pulls it in. Again, we see that the salmon is bled right away. To reset the drift net, the main float is first thrown into the current in the river, and then the net follows. The third type of gill net is the pole gill net. The pole extends out over the water. It has a pulley attached to the end in order to pull the net back and forth. This net has weights along the bottom to hold it straight in the water, but it doesn't need floats since it is held up by the pole. Shown here are more of the fish camps. There are camps on both sides of the Fraser River, the Bridge River side and the 6 Mile side. Both sides have been traditional fishing spots of the Statimc people for a very long time. The rough water at the falls are said to provide the best fishing spots found anywhere along the Fraser River. The blue and orange tarps show again where the camps and fish racks are. The tarps act to keep the drying salmon in the shade. Before tarps and plyboards, leafy branches were arranged on top of the drying racks to keep the sun from shining directly on the drying salmon. In traditional times, the main method of catching salmon was with hoop nets. There are two types of hoop nets, the swing net and the set net. The hoop nets are generally used in the spots where the water is rougher. The swing net is the smaller of the two hoop nets. The fisherman swings this net into the water, following the current downstream, and catches the salmon swimming upstream. The set net is the larger hoop net. It is positioned in a spot where there is a back eddy in the water. In the old days, the fishermen used to build platforms above the river and fish with the large set nets. Nowadays, the set nets aren't quite as large as they used to be, and the fishermen no longer practice platform fishing. Now the set net hoop is approximately 5 feet in length and about 3 feet in width, while the net extends out about 4 feet. The set net is anchored on a nearby rock and has a trip rope controlling the net on the hoop. The hoop and pole are usually made out of Douglas fir saplings. Nowadays, people also use light metal such as aluminum to construct a hoop and pole for a net. The rings that allow a set net to open and close on the hoop were traditionally made from mountain sheep horns, but now we use the store-bought steel rings. Cooperation and working together are essential to ensuring a successful summer of salmon fishing. The fishermen usually have one or more helpers nearby. Everyone has a job to do. From this shot, you can see that the terrain around the Fraser River is quite treacherous. The only way to get to the river for fishing is through the use of foot trails. Some trips down to the river can take quite a while, depending on which fishing spots are being used. Salmon are stored for winter use in several ways. In addition to wind-drying salmon, we practice contemporary methods of preserving, such as making salt salmon, canning salmon, and freezing salmon. The first salmon to come up the river are not lean enough for drying and are usually canned, frozen, or salted. Before electricity and refrigeration became common, the Statimc people used to preserve the early salmon with coarse salt. Salt salmon was made by using coarse salt between layers of filleted salmon. The salt salmon was stored in barrels. This method continues to be practiced today. Beverly Frank and her niece Brenda demonstrate how the salmon is prepared for processing in the pressure cooker. First, the salmon is sliced up to fit into the jars. Some people leave the backbone in when canning the salmon. The bones provide an excellent source of calcium. Bev takes the backbone out and cuts the salmon into nice small pieces. Salt is used for flavor. Vinegar is used if the bones are left in. It acts to soften the bones. The salmon is processed for 100 minutes in the pressure cooker. Bev gives a quick demonstration of the freezing process. We see her grandniece Krista watching carefully. Before too long, Krista will be helping her aunt in one way or another. We see that the salmon is cleaned and wiped dry. The first piece will make a nice meal of baked salmon. The remainder is cut into a couple of salmon steaks and packaged. You can see that the flesh of the salmon is still nice and fresh. salmon is put into freezer bags. The air is removed, and there are a couple packages of fresh salmon ready for the freezer. When the leaner salmon used for drying begin to arrive in Statimc territory, the people begin their move down to their camping spots along the river. All of the supplies for camp are carried in by backpack or by horseback. Karen Alec and Bucky Ned make their first trip of the year to prepare their fish rack and campsite. All along the river, instant communities begin to reappear. Franklin Ledoux demonstrates the traditional method of cutting salmon for drying. The backbone and underside of the belly are left on and dried. Saskatoon sticks are used to hold the salmon open so that it will dry properly and not fold over. The tradition of wind-drying salmon continues to be passed from one generation to the next without much changes. Bernadine James shows us the contemporary method used to dry salmon. She removes a few strips of flesh from this salmon because it is still pretty fat. The salmon is cut to the right thickness so that it will dry nicely. We see that the salmon has been cut open and that the backbone has been removed. Some people still dry the backbone and save it for soups. The underside of the salmon is often saved for salt salmon or for freezing. Sometimes it is fried up for supper down at the river. The length of each side is scored with neat, thin strips. This allows the wind to reach inside of the salmon and ensures that the salmon dries properly. The sliced salmon takes about 7 to 10 days to dry, depending on the weather. Warm, windy weather is ideal for drying salmon. The salmon is stretched after the sides are scored. This is just to make sure that the slices aren't touching each other and to allow for adequate amounts of wind to reach the inside of the salmon. Salt is used to speed up the dehydration process. It is also used for flavoring. Pepper is used to keep the flies away. It adds to the flavor also. The thin strips which are cut off when the salmon is too fat are also seasoned and dried. They dry fairly quickly and are good for snacks. When the salmon is dried, it can be eaten right away. Wind-dried salmon, smoked-dried salmon, powdered salmon, prepared salmon eggs, and salmon oil were vital to ensuring the winter survival of our Statimc ancestors, as well as being the main source of winter food for our ancestors. The wind-dried salmon were also the main unit of exchange in their trading activities with surrounding nations. Chaylin and her older sister Leanne enjoy some of this year's dried salmon. The importance of salmon to the Statimc culture cannot be overstated. This has been a presentation on Statimc salmon fishing. Kukstim Kalak.